Iguodala. Iguodala to Curry, back to Iguodala, up for the layup. Oh, blocked by James. Curry, one-on-one. Irving puts it up. It's good. Kyrie Irving from downtown. The three, steps back, crossover, puts up a three. Rebound James. Second. It's over. It's over. Cleveland is a city of champions once again. The Cavaliers are NBA champions.
Cleveland, this is for you.
Good evening, Cavs fans. Welcome to another episode of the Block the Shot to Stop, our NBA Weekly edition. And we have a very special guest on here tonight, fellow Blue Wire Media podcast member, part of the NBA Front Office podcast, works for Spot Tracks as well, writing, podcasting for them. Many of you know him, Keith Smith. Thank you, Keith, for being here with us tonight.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, and when we first connected a few weeks ago, I told you, you know, it was kind of at the height of the Cavs mania here at the beginning of January, and really wanted you to come on to talk a little bit about this team overall, what the ceiling of this team is, maybe what they should do, shouldn't do, you know, regarding the trade deadline. So we'll get into all that, but I wanted to start out, and I prepped you that I was going to do this. If for anybody who doesn't know, many people found out about Keith's work and everything. Keith came up with the idea for the NBA bubble and wrote a whole article. I believe it was on Yahoo at that time. Is that correct? Yeah. And so it kind of outlined the whole plan, and then sure enough, the NBA took it and did it and was able to finish the season. And many Cavs fans beloved LeBron James won his fourth championship because of it. So I'd love you to tell me, you know, however short or long version you want, Keith, of how you came up with that, how you outlined it, and please let us know, because it's one of the better ideas anybody had during COVID.
Yeah, I can give you a very kind of abbreviated version. Before I started doing basketball full time, I worked for Disney for 20 years, a variety of different jobs, all like administrative type things, forecasting, analytics, that kind of work, a lot of budgeting type stuff. Shocker, right? I love the salary cap. So surprising that that's what I did for Disney. But in my last almost 5 years there, I was like, it had really turned into basically doing two full-time jobs. Like I would do my Disney job was like 9 to 5, and then I'd come home and do basketball all night. And I was like a walking zombie. And literally 3 weeks to the day before Rudy Gobert, shut down the league that one night, I left my job with Disney of 20 years to cover the NBA full time. I was with Yahoo at the time. I was also working for NBC Sports and Slam Magazine. And I was like, I can do this. I don't need to do the office job. I don't need to go to bed at 2 a.m. and get up at 5 and barely function anymore for half my year. And it was awesome for 3 weeks and everything kind of shut down. But, it all ended up okay in the back end. But during COVID, we were all trying to find anything to cover. It started out initially, well, it's only be 2-3 weeks. We'll figure it out. Then we were doing things like, let's cover horse in depth. If everybody remembers when they were playing horse on their phones and putting it on ESPN and stuff. And it was like, okay, we'll cover that. And they were only like, we did expansion mock drafts and all kinds of, stuff that was just like, whatever we got. And, there started to be all these things like, man, they should bring the NBA back, bring them all to a private island, play games on cruise ships. There was like, some people were like, they should just go to Las Vegas. And I was like, none of these work. The cruise ship doesn't work. Private island's not going to be a thing. And then I was like, the idea of Vegas, like, it's a real city. And then I was like, Disney's just sitting there empty. There's at the time, there was nothing going on there. I obviously knew the property really well. My editor over at Yahoo, he knows the property really well too, and was very like, all right, what's your idea? And I kind of pitched it. And he's like, write it. We'll see where it goes. And we wrote it. It posted in the middle of April. It got pretty good traction that first day, because I think everybody was like, hey, maybe. We got a note back from the NBA league office, from someone in the league office, that said, thank you for a thoughtful and thorough article. We appreciate the coverage of the league, and but blah 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 blah. And then it was like 2 weeks later that they were like, hey, the NBA is thinking about this, and maybe Disney. And then it took on this whole life of its own and went crazy. And it was just convergence of my two worlds that never I pray will never happen again. We never need to go through that again. But yeah, it was a wild time and a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, it's awesome. Well, I mean, like you said, at a time where everybody was throwing every idea out at the wall, you had one that stuck. So that's great. And like I said, it gave a lot of us something to do and pass the time with during kind of that horrible summer of 2020. And so yeah, we appreciate it. And I'm forever grateful that you came up with the idea and the NBA adopted it.
A lot of fun.
Yeah. So let's talk. We're obviously a Cavs centric podcast. We will talk about the NBA as a whole, but I did want to start with the Cavs. And for somebody like yourself that covers the NBA from sun up to sundown, if not past that and everything, I just kind of want to start with like your general perspectives of the Cavs this year. They've obviously been flirting with having the best record, 1 or 2 all season, a little bit of a rust patch lately, but overall, most things are sunny. So what have you seen from the Cavs this year as a whole?
Yeah, I think the Cavs have followed the kind of traditional contender path. They few years ago, they were good again and made a run towards maybe making, the postseason, then made it into the postseason and got bounced. Then last year made it a little further, did, injuries and everything else, ended up knocking them out. And now this year you've seen them really get into contender status. And I like to say that's like the traditional pathway, right? You just kind of build, and then you're there. I think the start to this year, I don't even know if the most ardent Cavaliers homer could have projected and predicted that they'd play the way they did out of the gate, so well with so many wins. They've come back a little bit to earth. It was funny. I was doing a radio spot in the Cleveland area probably about 2 weeks ago. And I mentioned, I'm like, yeah, there's you're starting to see a couple bumps, right? And as teams are seeing them for a second and third time, some of this stuff's not catching them. And the local hosts were not having it. They're like, what are you talking about? They're going to win 70 plus games. I was like, all right, we'll see. I mean, maybe. I'm not, if they do, they do. But yeah, they've firmly cemented themselves as a title contender, and all the rest of it, record-setting, wins and all that can all be, that can all be. You worry about that, as you worry about that. But my thing is, none of that matters, much like Cavs fans know from being on the other side, if you don't win the title, right? Like, no one really cares that you won 70 plus games if you don't win the title. I would rather be firmly established as, all right, we're in the title contender mix now. And that's exactly where they are.
Yeah, I agree. We've said, and we said this in the best of times, and frankly, the last couple of weeks have been the worst of times for the Cavs. Like, we think this team, when it's whole and playing well, can beat anyone and can win a championship, but they're not so talented that if they're not playing well or if they're missing a couple guys, they can't just overcome that. They're not. But I think that's squarely where they are. I think they're in the group of whatever you want to say, 5-6 teams that are at the top echelons, but nobody's too much higher than anybody else. You could maybe say the Thunder a notch above everybody, and Cavs are kind of right there. I did want to ask you about one Cav in particular, because frankly, the ascension this season and the struggles last couple of weeks is kind of hinged on Evan Mobley. And so I'm curious of you. We've said on the podcast, it's actually, he reminds me of the modern day Chris Bosh. And it's kind of funny if you compare the two, like first 4 seasons, like how similar the ascent is. But I want to get a feeling from you on Evan, what you think his ceiling could be this year, what it could be for his career.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of look at it the 2 different ends of the floor. Defensively, he could win a defensive player of the year. There's no doubt in my mind. He's got that ability. Whether he will, that'll just kind of hinge on what happens with Wembanyama first and foremost, right? I mean, we might be able to just write him in pencil for the next decade plus, and that would just be unfortunate for Evan Mobley. But yeah, it would not shock me if he was in the mix, but perennial all defense guys clearly going to be there. And the question then was, all right, is the offense going to get there? And from day one, it's been, all right, this guy can finish. He's got a nice touch around the rim. He can get up for lobs. He runs the floor really well. He's pretty solid in pick and roll finishing and all that. And then because it's the way the game is played now, and quite frankly, because the team very early on was committed to playing him as a 4, is he going to shoot? Right. Yeah. Is he going to shoot well? And this year he's obviously taken off with that. What's funny is I was looking at his stats the other day and I was like, I never would have guessed just raw stats that he's averaging like just a tick under in assists per game. because his passing seems so much better this year
Yeah.
than it has at any point. They put him in the middle of the lane regularly now, and he makes these great decisions. I go back to that Knicks series a couple years ago where whether it was on the roll or just those flash cuts to the nail, and the defense would collapse, and it was like he had no idea what he was going to do. And then kind of in retrospect, that's probably the best thing that ever happened for him there, because now it was all right. I saw this. I saw all these different looks. I now know how to handle this. And clearly him and the team spent time on getting him there. And I think he's really taken that leap to now where it is. He's always going to be an elite defensive player, but he's right there as an offensive player too, and probably an all-star this year. I'd be kind of shocked if he's not, named to the all-star team. Just a wonderful season. He's one of my favorite guys to watch night in, night out in the league, just because there's so many different things he does now as a big man. I even like to just starting a little bit more to drive closeouts as teams are respecting that outside shot a little bit more. You're seeing him now put the ball on the floor for a couple dribbles and either get himself to the basket or make that next read, or a lot of hockey assists where he gets the one pass and then it pings over, which is probably why his assists are down just a little bit. But terrific player.
Yeah, I agree. He does. We like the term hockey assist, so I'm glad you used that on this. But you can tell he's just so much more confident putting the ball on the floor this year than he has been previously. And I think you're right. I think that's even the next expansion of his game as he started to hit threes and hopefully can continue at a good clip from there. Is can he then put the ball on the floor from the wing, get to the basket, which he's doing more of. So I agree. So I kind of threw this question in for you because I just kind of want to see where you're at as, an NBA guru, but not necessarily a Cavs fan. I said on the podcast last night, post game from the Rockets to my two co-hosts, and I kind of said it on a whim and I kind of want to see the reaction, but I told them, I think the wrong Cavs guard is starting the All-Star game. I actually think Darius Garland has said he better start to current season. If for no other reason, he's been a lot more consistent. Mitchell has had some great peaks and he is a great player. And I think both of them should make it. But if I had to choose one over the other, I actually think Garland has had a little bit better season. So I want to get your sense on, Garland and maybe that's out there statement.
Yeah, I mean, it's not crazy by any means. And I have no issue. They're both going to be there, in my opinion. So I don't really have any issue with Mitchell starting. I don't know how the media and player vote shook out there. It didn't surprise me. Mitchell got more in the fan vote. He's just more of the star level guy, 100%. If you will. There he's more the kind of known product. There's also still the more flashy, exciting plays that are going to show up more in highlights than Garland is. But yeah, you're spot on. Like if you told me Darius Garland was starting and Mitchell was a reserve, I would have had no issue with that at all. I had Darius Garland would have been my next guy. He was my third guard behind. I had Mitchell and Brunson just because I do think Donovan Mitchell has recommitted himself on the defensive end of the floor more. And it's kind of funny. I was talking about this with a friend of mine in the league just a couple weeks ago. And I was like, remember when he came in with Utah? I was like, this guy's going to be a nails defender. He's going to be so tough, but we don't know if he'll ever be any good offensively. And then within 2 years, there's he kind of doesn't really play a lot of defense anymore. He's just, now an offense only guy. And he, I really think he's gotten back. And I think that maybe tipped it a little bit in my mind when I'm watching the games. I watch a lot of games after the fact. I catch games live, but I'm kind of flying in and out of games there. But when you're watching the games after the fact, you can kind of sometimes just zone in on one thing, and I see him making more defensive plays. Not that Garland's playing poorly on that end of the floor, but maybe that was the difference maker for some. But I'm really splitting hairs to try to explain a decision. I don't know why it went the way it went, and I again I would have been fine with both. I think Garland, he's pushing. He's going to be pushing. Is he at 50, 40, 90 now? Almost.
He's been flirting back and forth with it. I think he actually might have fell under 90 with the 2 missed free throws.
Yeah. So that's, and that's, whatever, right? 50%, 43%, 88%. I just looked it up. So that's, there's nothing to quibble out there. He's been terrific. And I love that he does seem like the one when they do get stuck in the mud a little bit offensively. It seems like Garland's the one who gets out of it because then he is, I'm going to push pace, where Mitchell is, I don't mean this as a criticism, but he just kind of, he does what he does. Like he just is, I'm going to kind of attack the way I attack. And more often than not, it'll go well. But with Garland, he can really vary his attack. He'll push pace. He'll start really racing the ball up and down the floor. He'll run more pick and roll. He'll start calling his own number more often. And I think that's been a lot of fun to watch him kind of really grow into that. And you saw flashes. It's more than flashes. It was like chunks of it over the last couple of seasons. But I think the big thing with Darius Garland, I'll knock on wood here, that he's been healthy this year. We haven't seen where it's like, man, Darius Garland has really gotten going, and now he's out for a month.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That felt like that was, the story of his first few years in the league.
You're right. And what is so impressive, in addition, obviously the skill he has and everything, I said right now, he's not only one of the quickest players in the league, I think he's one of the best conditioned. Like I never see when I see everybody else tired out there, and it makes sense that he's trained with Steph Curry the last couple of summers because Steph's always been famous. As great as Steph is at everything, like he was always the best conditioned athlete in the NBA. Maybe still is at 35. I don't know, but
he might be.
Yeah. So okay,
LeBron's hard to beat too.
Yeah, that is very, very true. Well, I still thinking from a Cavs perspective, but I want to zoom out just kind of at the whole Eastern Conference for a second, because now with the struggles of the last couple of weeks, the Cavs now kind of are people are closing in on them a little bit. And I kind of wanted to ask you, I guess, as far as the East from now to the end of the season, both as far as seeding goes, and do you think, I'll start from a Cavs perspective. Do you think teams in the particular teams in the East would be the worst or better matchups for the Cavs from your perspective?
That's a good question. I still think Boston can give them some trouble. I think the Celtics, when they're at their best and playing their best, will really pick at the Cavs defense. And one of the things that I have noticed over the last, let's call it about 3 weeks, when it's been a little more uneven for Cleveland, is even in the wins, teams are starting to, again, teams are seeing them second, third, maybe even fourth time for some of these teams. All right, we're drawing these lineups now. We're going to find this guy. We're going to find this guy. And that's, the Celtics call it their killer whale offense, because they hunt in a pod to isolate the weakest member. And it doesn't matter who's making the strikes. Like, it doesn't matter, but we're just going to get it done. And that's one of the things they'll find Garland on the block against Jaylen Brown, against Jason Tatum. They'll find, guys just, when George Niang's in there, they'll get him isolated, those sorts of things. So that's one. The Knicks are an interesting matchup. Yeah. I think again, because the Knicks play a smaller backcourt themselves a lot, because that's kind of where Hart and Bridges are kind of interchangeable a little bit. But you could get away with having a smaller defender on the floor at times. And as great as an offensive player as Karl-Anthony Towns is, he's not someone who you're going to isolate an attack with. So you can get away with some of the switching stuff that they want to do, maybe playing a little bit of a smaller guy at times if they needed to go that way. You could get away with that. So, but those are really the only kind of two teams that really immediately come to mind. You would prefer probably not to have to deal with Philadelphia if they make it in as the 8 seed, just because it's this team, and now we got to deal with Embiid and George and Maxey, and just knowing those guys get it going. It's just going to be harder than it needs to be in a 1 versus 8. Matchup, but we'll see. I mean, we might be getting way ahead of ourselves. We don't even know if they'll even be there. But that's it. I don't worry too much about them with the Bucks or the Pacers or the Magic. Those teams are all, I think Cleveland's certainly established themselves on a different level than those teams.
Yeah, you said 2 of the 3 teams that came to my mind in Boston and the Knicks, because grant they're second and third in the standings, and I do think that's why it's so important for the Cavs to get that number 1 seed, because then they only have to go through one of them, right? At most, right? And so the two of them. And then for whatever reason, going on, this is probably the third season, the Atlanta Hawks always give them the worst
They
time.
get Boston too. Atlanta just needs
Yeah.
to play good teams. They just lost 2 in a row to the Raptors, and it's like but yeah, there was a point where they this was much earlier in the season, but they had beaten the Cavs and the Celtics, and they had the Wizards like only 2 wins at that time. We're against the Hawks. So it's just, if I'm the Hawks, I'm like, no more games against lottery teams. We don't want to play good teams. So yeah, they're just a weird team.
They are. The one thing that 3 teams have in common, they have big, skilled perimeter guys. So you're talking the Tatums, the Bridges, DeAndre Hunter absolutely killed the Cavs in a back-to-back earlier this season.
Yeah,
Teams like that. And so that's a good pivot for me for one of the questions that's right in your wheelhouse. There's a ton of discussion about what the Cavs should do with the trade deadline. And they're a super interesting team because they're as far as the trade deadline goes, because they're the best record in the East, even though there's been a couple cracks lately. They are in a very interesting position with the salary cap because they're just into luxury tax, not into the first apron. And they have all of this young talent that by next year, they're going to be a second apron team, right? So a lot of the talk is, do you go for it now and start the clock on being an apron team and make a trade to add money while you can? Or do you try and get under the tax and everything? So kind of starting there, like what do you think about the options that the Cavs have as far as the trade deadline goes?
Yeah, and it's a far more interesting question today than it probably would have been a few weeks ago.
Sure.
They had kept ripping off wins with the way Boston is kind of just muddled along at 500 for a month now. They could have basically already had the conference put away.
Yeah.
But they came back to the pack a little bit. Celtics have won just enough that Cleveland still should be the heavy favorite to be the 1 seed. But it's close enough now where it could be like, I could kind of see how, maybe that could go the other way if the Celtics, they have a tendency in the second half of seasons to rip off like a 20-2 stretch. And if they do that and Cleveland is, merely 15-5, now all of a sudden it's, it's a race again. Yeah. So I think one of the things we would be like, what you need to look at now is it's probably more of a conversation for Kobe Altman to say, we can't just say, well, let's just get healthy. And that's our moves. And we're just going to run. Now you probably are a little bit more interested in, all right, what do we want to do? That's where him and Dan Gilbert need to 100% be on the same page. Now I will say this, Dan Gilbert has never shied away from paying the tax.
Correct.
Right. They've had very expensive teams in the past. So I don't think he's going to put up roadblocks the way some other owners do, where it is, no tax, like don't.
Right.
Now here's the challenge. You'd rather probably not start that process until next year if you can avoid it. Because if all goes the way we're hoping and thinking it will, they're going to be a tax team for probably a solid, 4 or 5 years in a row. And that's where, if we don't need to start the repeater and all that other stuff. On the good news is they've got some tradable salary that they could move if they really, wanted to. And that's without touching the kind of core 4 guys of Garland, Mitchell, Allen, and Mobley, because that's not going to happen. Those guys aren't going anywhere. So then it becomes, all right, what is it we need? And how do we go about getting it? Is that going to be Karis LeVert? Is that going to be Isaac Okoro? Is that going to be George Niang? Are we going to move draft capital, the minimal that they have left? What does that look like? Where do we go? Those are the questions that need to be asked.
Yeah, absolutely. And the biggest deficiency on the Cavs roster is what we just talked about, the big perimeter guys, basically the guys who can guard Jason Tatum and Obi and Anunoby. And we just got killed by guys like Lou Dort. That's the one thing the only guy the Cavs have that fits that mold at all is Dean Wade. And Dean is a great role player for the Cavs. He's also very injury prone.
Yeah. I heard again last night, right?
Yeah, we think that was more precautionary, but over the last 2 or 3 years, he's been great. There was like crazy stat up until the recent slide, like that the Cavs were like 90-30 with Dean Wade in the lineup the last 2.5 years. But from that, and before we get into we don't have to get into specifics, but like if that's what the Cavs are shopping for, like a big perimeter guy who can guard the Jason Tatums and the other big wings in the world, who do you think is going to be available? Who do you think is going to be attainable?
Yeah, that's the like $1 million question here, right? Because Cam Johnson was floated, clearly available, attainable. That's who knows, right? Because if I am Brooklyn, and I said this at the time when it was even mentioned that the Cavs have some interest, was I need at a minimum Jalen Tyson in that trade, because that's the kind of 1 first-round pick, if you will, and then the Cavs going to get another pick, and then still some more matching salary. So you're talking like Karis LeVert, because he's an expiring salary, and that would, clearly interest the Nets. Tyson and maybe another pick, and all right, maybe that's enough to get us there. And we run with that. Question is he enough of a defensive upgrade? And that part I'm a little less certain about. He's a good offensive player. He's not a bad defender. So then you start looking like, all right, well, what bad teams have guys? And that's where you could maybe get into like a guy like Cody Martin of the Hornets. Not going to be no one's running out and buying a Cody Martin jersey and, canceling all their vacation plans for the summer because you're booking finals tickets, but, a nice upgrade. What about a guy like Matisse Thybulle if he could get healthy out of Portland? That'd be somebody that I think would make some sense potentially for them. I kind of looked around like at Washington and I was like, they don't really have a defender kind of like that. So those are the kind of guys I think you start kind of looking around at. And then all of a sudden you start coming up with, there's not a lot of them, right? There's just not a lot of those guys because when teams get them, they don't want to give them up, right? That's the thing. Now, a very small move that they could make could be if he could get healthy, a guy like Torrey Craig. Could come in. That's another guy who can at least give you some wing defense. He'd be solid-ish in that realm. So those are probably the guys you're looking at a little bit more than necessarily like, all right, what's the big move we're going to make that's going to get everybody jumping up and down and going crazy?
Yeah. I agree. Cody Martin's name has been floated out on this podcast before. We've thrown out bigger swings. Cam Johnson is a big swing. I don't know if he's the perfect fit for the Cavs because they really need defense in that wing position, and it's not necessarily Cam Johnson's forte. Until he got hurt, my dream was, can you figure out a way where it's a third team, give up everything, is to put Herb Jones with the big four. Because
they didn't have enough to get him.
I know, but I was hoping the Pelicans, they seem kind of panicked and maybe, but so that was my pipe dream.
I can tell you. So it's funny, just if anybody stumbles on this from anywhere, the Pelicans have shut everybody down on Herb Jones. That doesn't mean he's completely untouchable. I'm sure if you came in and were like, here's 4 first-round picks and 3 swaps, they'd be like, bye, Herb Jones. We drive you to the airport. But for the things that teams are making reasonable offers, no one's going to get him away from the Pels.
Yeah. I was going to throw one other name at you that we didn't mention. We have mentioned it before. And again, this might be kind of a pipe dream. Do you think the Kings would be interested at all about hearing Keegan Murray deals? Because he's had a really off season this year. And I it's one guy I'm curious about.
Yeah. So it seems like Keegan Murray, we're starting to see a little bit of a trend with him now where it is, he's a very slow starter and then he picks it up. He's done it in each of his 3 NBA years. So that could be it there. I think too, they made major changes with DeMar DeRozan. They really, their 4th starter was kind of a revolving door for a long time. It seems like they've landed on Malik Monk now. I'm under Doug Christie, but yeah, again, the Keegan Murray would be the kind of guy where I think, maybe you could get him, but you're going to have to really pay.
Yeah.
The Kings are, that's the challenge, right? And if you're the Cavs, the challenge becomes, they don't have a whole lot to really pay with because they owe all those picks to Utah from the Mitchell trade, which has obviously worked out, quite well. And no one should have any regrets. It's just the reality you're working with now.
Yep. It is. All right, Keith, I'm going to get you out of here on this. I want to ask, so let's say, whatever it is, 3-4 months from now, the Cavs actually pull it together and win the Eastern Conference, the NBA Finals. What would have to happen for them to get there, whether it's addition, young guys hitting their ceilings? Like, if in a perfect world, the Cavs put it all together, get to the NBA Finals, how would that happen?
Yeah, health, first of all. We saw, I very much bristle when people are like, Boston only won because everybody was hurt. Boston also rampaged through the league regular season and playoffs and mostly destroyed teams. So, but would it have been a little harder? Probably, but I just think that was one of those years where they just weren't going to get beat.
Yeah.
So, but health matters. So get healthy first and foremost. And then, probably make a minor move, around the edges of the rotation. Maybe somebody who could be, I don't even want to say a fifth starter, but a fifth closer, right? If you need it. And I would like to see them get somebody who could kind of play like 3-4, where it is, hey, we could close with one big if we really wanted to or needed to. We could go that direction. And that way that guy kind of becomes almost the third guy. Somebody who I thought of, because there's all these things floating around that, is very attainable salary-wise that could make sense for the Cavs. He's much more of a 4-5. But if they wanted to jump into, if this ends up one of these rumored 4, 5, 6 team trades and jump in and snag Bobby Portis somehow, I think he's actually a guy who could really help them, because I think he'd be an upgrade over George Niang there, and that might be a way to just upgrade that spot. And no, but that's the kind of thing you're looking to do. And then if you could like somehow get Matisse Thybulle, but I'll say this, I'm a big Isaac Okoro guy. I think Isaac Okoro is actually far better than he ever gets credit for. And I think, getting him healthy gives you that kind of rugged wing defender. And I think the one thing with Isaac Okoro that's really going to help is he's now had a couple playoffs to see. And especially last year was like, all right, I need to be a little bit more of the guy here to help out with the injuries. So I think, you might be able to get a little bit more out of him. The guy I would be looking to probably move if I'm Cleveland is Karis LeVert, just because expiring contract, that's always going to have value around the league. The challenge is you lose your third ball handler, your third playmaker if you move him. So I just don't panic, right? Like, okay, so what? You're not going to win 70 plus games. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Go win your 60 plus, get the 1 seed, and do your thing. I mean, the team's still great. Like just because you had a couple close losses, like I saw some of the stuff last night on social media where what's wrong with this team? Why are they bad now? And it's like, in what world are they bad? They're just they hit a rough patch. Like that's it. And I mean, God, like I famously covered the Celtics for years. Like they're barely above 5. They won 11-9 in the last month in their last 20 games. Like that's that's bad. Like that. Like if you want to, and even there, I'm like, would y'all just breathe in Boston? Like it's okay. It's not the end of the world. But health and right seeds hit the right way. And I'll say this in the playoffs: take care of your business quickly. If you are the 1 seed, get rid of the 8. Don't mess around. Get rid of them in 4 or 5 games. If you're the then you move into that second round, you're going to be favored. You should beat probably whoever it is. Get rid of them quickly. Don't start messing around with 6 and 7 game series. One, you go to a 7 game series, anything can happen in a game 7. We've all seen that before. And then the other thing is you just enter more opportunity, more games you play, more opportunity. Somebody might get hurt, and you're just going to make your path harder. Guys are going to wear down. So get it done. I would love to see them hit the beginning of April and be able to really be like, these 2 weeks in April, we are on vacation mode. We're going to play just enough to stay sharp, and that's it, because we've clinched all there is to clinch, and then we're going to lock in that first round, and we're going to blow the doors off these teams. And I think there's a chance that's the way that happens in the early rounds, and then you'll be ready to go in the later rounds.
Agreed. I think health is obviously key. I do think it's a big key for the Cavs for the number 1 seed to avoid, having to play both Boston and New York, as well as they have a fantastic home court advantage, probably like top 5, 6 in the league. So, and Kobe Altman has done such an incredible job patiently building this team into a winner over the last 5 years. I would be shocked if he made a panic move here at the deadline just because of a couple weeks of bad play when they're missing.
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I completely agree. I don't think you're going to see them like to me, like if we're sitting there and the phone buzzes and it's like the Cavs are trading one of the 4 guys, I'd be like, what are they doing? Like, it better be like Giannis is coming back in some fantasy land trade that, came out of nowhere. Then my tune will change. But until that point, like, do your thing. I will say they're going to look a little bit different next year. I don't think it's tenable to be as expensive as they're going to be as Mobley's extension kicks in, as Mitchell's new deal is fully coming in over the next couple seasons. Garland, Allen's going to be on his extension where he just bumps up a little bit. Even as the cap goes up, that will help offset all of that some. But like Mobley's making 3 times as much almost. So like, and it's 100% the right move. I no questions asked. It's just, can you re-sign Karis LeVert? Like, that's why this is the hardest part for front offices. Is the conversation they need to be having right now is Karis LeVert going to put us over the top, or can we get a Karis LeVert replacement that doesn't lower our ceiling for this year and rebalances things a little bit with our books moving forward? Because if you're in a position where it's like, we can't really re-sign him to a reasonable deal, you need to think about moving him now, as long as you're fairly certain we're not all of a sudden be like, well, that wrecked our chances at winning a title. And you just got to be smart with that kind of stuff. So that's the place where the Cavs are going to be challenged really here over the, I almost said 2 weeks, but really like week and a half until the trade deadline.
Yeah, no, it's because really whatever move they make at this trade deadline and next summer, that's basically going to be their team for like the next 3 years going forward, because they're going to be pretty locked in after that. So this is their first of 2 more opportunities to kind of dictate their future as far as bringing in additional members of the team. All right. So with that, Keith, thank you so much for your time. I make sure you check out Keith at Spotrac and NBA Front Office. Thank you to Blue Wired for not only our podcast, but Keith's and Trevor's podcast as well. Tune in. We will be back tomorrow night after, oh my gosh, who do they play tomorrow? After the game tomorrow night. I'm blanking. But for Tim Daniel and Skylar Webker, I'm Kevin Lynch. Thank you for listening, and go Cavs.